Alright guys, it's finally finished. My custom StarCraft 2 Magic the Gathering Commander deck is on its way, and I am stoked. This has become an unhealthy obsession of mine for the past month. I tried to keep it lore accurate, so we have resource management and we have structure mechanics that I have built into this deck. This is not my typical format of video, so bear with me here. But today we are going to go over the custom mechanics I've built, the commander I have, then the commons, the uncommons, the rares, and the mythics. And I think you guys are going to like it. If you like StarCraft, I think you're going to like it. And I also have nobody to talk about this with, except for one of my best friends who's really into Magic the Gathering. But other than that, it's you guys. And I have to show this to somebody. Otherwise, I will not be able to rest. So this is a Zerg-themed deck, and I tried to make it true to how Zerg play in RTS to a degree. There are 3 core mechanics that I think you should know before we jump right into the cards. So the first set of mechanics are the structure mechanics. Zerg structures in this deck are enchantments, and they do have basic abilities, but to operate to their full potential, you need a certain amount of structures on your field, a lot like a Zerg base or something like that. So for example, for X ability to work, you need 3 Zerg structures on the field for that ability to actually function. You also have creep mechanics, which I'm stoked on. It's a sort of play on resource management. A creep counter is a counter you put on a land you control, and then you can tap that land for any color of mana to cast a Zerg spell or activate a Zerg ability. But to balance this out, I actually implemented cards that consume creep. So you're constantly trying to put creep counters on your lands, and then later on you have to use them to activate abilities for some other creatures or enchantments you control. And then there's also enchantments that require you to have a certain amount of creep to function. So there's a lot of resource management and strategy that I'm trying to implement into these mechanics. The last mechanic I implemented is the We Are the Swarm mechanic. It's really basic. Whenever a creature with We Are the Swarm deals combat damage to a player, it creates a copy of itself. So they're like bacteria. 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, and so on. It starts off slow, but if it remains unanswered, it can become really punishing. Okay, with all the mechanics out of the way, let's go ahead and introduce our commander. Be warned, she's a bit wordy. Also, I realized after downloading the card images that I got lost in the sauce and made probably way too many mythics and rares, so I'm concerned how this deck is going to play in the early game because I have 7 commons, which is disgustingly low. But that's where I rely on you guys. Leave a comment down below what you think I should cut or add to this deck. This is a red, blue, and black deck. Let's go ahead and introduce the Queen of Blades. All right, here she is in all her glory, our commander. As a disclaimer, I did use ChatGPT for some of the artwork because I'm not an artist. You would see stick figures on these cards, and that would look even worse. And this is a personal project. I can't really commission an artist for 100 or so cards. Less than 100. It's more like 70 cards, and then, you know, the lands are repeats. But yeah, it's not realistic. So I used ChatGPT with a lot of prompting and a lot of inspiration from the source material. So if you see some AI slop, that's because it is AI slop. But I tried to make it look as good as possible. Anyways, the Queen of Blades, she is a 5 cost, 2 colorless, 1 blue, 1 black, 1 red. She has first strike because she's psychic. And she has a few abilities here. So sacrifice another creature, draw a card, but if that creature had We Are the Swarm, you draw 2 cards instead. So it can really start ramping up a bit on the card draw, especially because this is not once per turn. And whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you can choose one. You create a 1/1 black Swarm Brood creature token with We Are the Swarm, so it starts to multiply itself, giving you sacrifice fodder. Or you can put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control with We Are the Swarm. So most of the creatures I have with We Are the Swarm start off really low. I didn't want it to be too abusive. But as the commander stays on the field and as you do damage to your opponent, those creatures get really scary, and those creatures also multiply themselves, and they also provide you with potential card draw, which is really cool. Anyways, that is the commander. Let me know what you think of her. I don't know if I'm going to keep her a 5-drop. I think with all these abilities, she's definitely going to stay a 5-drop. I could not justify making this a 4-drop, not with her card draw, not with her buffs. But there's definitely cards out there that are ridiculous for 4-drops. So let me know what you think about this design. These are all prototypes. They are bound to change in the future, but that is our commander. And like I said, we are running a blue, red, and black deck. Now let's go ahead and jump into our commons. All right, we're starting off really simple with our first common. It is the Creep Tumor. So when Creep Tumor enters the battlefield, put a creep counter on target basic land you control. As a reminder, lands with creep counters have tap, add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast Zerg spells or activate abilities of Zerg permanents. But this also counts as a Zerg structure. So later on, when you have other Zerg structures that require you to have like 3 Zerg structures on the field to function to their full potential, this card counts for that. It's a 1-drop. I think it's pretty all right with that 1 enter battlefield effect, and otherwise it just sits there. Moving on to our second common, it's Biomass Allocation, a really simple card, 1 black mana, a sorcery. Choose one, put a creep counter on target basic land you control, or create a 0/1 changeling creature token, a black changeling creature token. Now, the reason I added changelings to this deck, not only because Zerg changelings exist in StarCraft lore, but also because certain structures like the Baneling Nest allow you to sacrifice a Zergling to create a Baneling. But my concern was, what if all my Zerglings are gone by the time I put down the Baneling Nest? It's useless. Well, now I have changeling tokens in this deck that are every creature type, so I could sacrifice a changeling and make a baneling. So that was my reasoning for this one. All right, here is our next common. It's the Hungry Brood. This is a 1 black mana, 1/2 creature. Now, this is a Zergling. The reason I didn't put Zergling in the name is because I have 3 Zerglings in this deck, and I didn't want each one to have the word Zergling in it. I didn't want it to be confusing. So instead, the subtype is Zergling, and the reason I put Zergling in the subtype is because, as I just mentioned, we have the Baneling Nest, and I can only use Zerglings to make Banelings out of the Baneling Nest. This creature is also pretty simple. It has We Are the Swarm, so whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, create a token that's a copy of this creature. When Zergling Brood dies, if you control a Zerg structure, create a 1/1 black Zergling creature token. So you have other options to create Zergling tokens, which you can later use as sacrifice fodder for your commander or for the Baneling Nest. And that was my reasoning with that. I also wanted to start implementing my structure mechanics, which is why you only create that token if you control a Zerg structure, and we have about 15 Zerg structures in this deck, so chances are you might have one by the time this thing dies. All right, here is our second Zergling, the Frenzied Runner. This is a red Zergling for 1 mana. It's got haste and We Are the Swarm, which is rude. If your opponent's tapped out before combat, you can pay 1 mana, put this guy down. He's got haste. You can immediately make a copy of him, and then this one didn't get past the audit. I have to reprint it. But when Zergling Ravager dies is what it says. It should say when Frenzied Runner dies, it deals 1 damage to any target, and with the Queen of Blades as our sack outlet, we can just sacrifice, draw 2 cards, and deal 1 damage to our opponent. And if this guy's making copies of himself, we can do that multiple times. So even though it's kind of basic at first, it gets really scary really fast, but that's why he's only a 1/1. This is something that you really want to hold in your hand until your opponent's tapped out, and you can immediately make a copy of this thing. I'm really excited to try it out once my proxies come. This card, I think, is going to be a lot of fun to play with. All right, moving on to our last Zergling. It is the Roamer. This is a black-blue flavored Zergling, and it costs 1 black, 1 blue. When it enters the battlefield, you survey 1. When it dies, you may put a creep counter on target permanent that already has 1 or more creep counters on it. So there's 1 land in here. It's a mythic land that lets you put a creep counter on any land you control. I don't have any mechanics that let you put creep counters on enchantments or anything like that. At least I don't recall that I do. I might. But I wanted to leave it open-ended in case I do expand on the mechanics a little bit. Pretty basic common, though, 1/1, with some pretty cool abilities. But this is something that you want to sacrifice or block with and then start pushing creep counters. Okay, here's our next common, the Brood Harvester for 1 black mana. It's a Zerg drone with a couple really important abilities. The first ability, tap, put a creep counter on target basic land you control. and when Brood Harvester dies, put a creep counter on target basic land you control. As I was building this deck, I got kind of scared that I was going to have too many creep consumers and not enough creep producers, because this deck does rely on creep as a resource. So I was like, the drone is perfect. It provides you resources. It's only a 0/2. It doesn't attack, but it does improve your board state by producing creep. And eventually, when your opponents get pissed off and decide to kill it, at the very least, it has that last stand ability where it puts one more creep counter on something. So that was my reasoning with this one. Really important, but pretty basic card. Okay, and for our last common, I know it's a ridiculously low amount of commons, but it's Feed the Swarm. This is actually a real card, and it had the perfect name. It's a 2-drop, 1 colorless, 1 black, a sorcery. Destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent controls. You lose life equal to that permanent's mana value. So yeah, it does burn you a bit, but at the very least, it's a pretty diverse kind of removal spell, which is important in Commander. You do want removal, so I decided to add this one. It's a pretty gory artwork, but whatever. I think it looks all right. So that is our last common. Let's move on to the uncommons. Okay, where uncommons are concerned, we have 24 of them, but 8 of them are mana stones or artifact mana ramp. I'm not going to go too into detail for each one, but we got Soul Ring, we got some talismans, and that is all based around my color or just mana ramp in general, just because in Commander, especially when you're not running green or something like that, if you want to keep up with mana ramp, you just throw in some artifacts. So we got 8 of those, and then we have some other spells that are a mix of custom cards and spells that are real that I just added artwork to fit the theme. So we're going to go ahead and jump into our first uncommon spell, but just know I am running 8 mana stones in this deck. Okay, here is our first uncommon spell that is not an artifact. It's Infestation. It is a 1 colorless, a 1 blue, and a 1 black, and I fully acknowledge this is a card that would end friendships. It's a sorcery, and it's infest target creature. So gain control of target creature for as long as you control a Zerg. That creature becomes infested. I had a lot of trouble making this card. It's definitely a blue-black control-flavored card, but it's pretty brutal that you're just taking control of a creature. So I added that text where you only control it for as long as you control a Zerg, but if you're running Zerg Tribal, you're probably always going to be controlling a Zerg unless there's a board wipe or something like that, in which case the creature you stole is also probably going to die. I thought maybe I would make it an enchantment instead, so your opponent has the option to at least steal their creature back. I don't know. Let me know down in the comments if this is too rude. But again, Magic can be a sweaty game, and it's a 3-drop sorcery. It's not an instant or anything like that, so you're not just going to swipe somebody's commander as it's attacking you or something. I don't know. I'm still torn on this card. I like it. Conceptually, I think it makes sense. I just don't know if it's too rude, but I also don't know if I care, as long as it's moderately balanced. Anyway, moving on to the next uncommon. Okay, our next uncommon, this is the Metabolized Tumor. It's a blue-black enchantment Zerg structure. This is effectively an upgrade on the Creep Tumor. So at the beginning of your end step, put a creep counter on target basic land you control. That is it. But as long as you control 3 or more lands with creep counters, Metabolized Tumor has hexproof. So now we're getting into some structures that require either other structures to function or creep to function. And this is where the resource management comes in, because certain cards remove creep, but if you have 3 or more creep counters, this thing can't be targeted. But there might be a scenario in the game where you remove enough creep counters that suddenly your opponent can target this thing, and this is a creep engine. So this is going to be a pretty big target for your opponent if they can actually make it go away. I thought it was a pretty cool design. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Blue-black was also the flavor that just made sense to me for this uncommon. But yeah, just a basic creep engine. Nothing too fancy, but definitely something that's very important in this deck. Okay, for our next uncommon, we've got the Baneling Nest. I felt it was fitting for the Baneling Nest to be red based on what Banelings do. So this is an uncommon, 1 colorless, 1 red mana, enchantment Zerg structure. It has tap, remove a creep counter from a land you control and sacrifice a Zergling creature you control. Create a red Baneling creature token. And Baneling creature tokens, When they die, they deal 2 damage to any target, but if they were sacrificed, they deal 4 damage to that target instead. Now, this structure is not only a creep consumer, but it also requires Zerg structures. So, if you control 3 or more Zerg structures at the beginning of your end step, if you dealt non-combat damage to a player this turn, put a creep counter on target basic land you control. So, if you're consuming creep a lot, at the very least, you can get some creep back if you're able to deal non-combat damage to a player, and creating banelings is one way to do that. And now we're getting to the point where I thought I was making something totally broken and overpowered and maybe did an overcorrection. So this is our next uncommon. It's the Carapace Breaker for 1 colorless, 1 black, and 1 red. It's a Zerg Roach with haste. It's a 3/2. This creature can't block, but when Siege Roach dies, this missed the audit. It should be when Carapace Breaker dies, target creature can't block this turn. So you could use it for a sack outlet in theory and then make a creature unable to block. So it's got some utility there, but I almost feel like I would want to give it We Are the Swarm and maybe take away haste. I feel like that would be a good compromise because this creature by itself, yeah, we will be using roaches to make Ravager tokens, but I don't know, man. Also, one thing I wanted to mention is I was considering making these creatures flip cards, like a roach flips into a Ravager, but realistically, you're technically sacrificing this creature because when it mutates or evolves, it will never go back to what it was before, and a flip card almost implies that it could go back, technically. That's why I decided to go with the sacrifice mechanic instead, using our Zerg structures. Anyways, I don't know if I'm a fan of this card, especially for the early game. I feel like we could make something more Zerg flavored. So I don't know if I want to add We Are the Swarm to this card, or I don't know, some creep mechanics. Not my favorite card that I made, but I was in crisis mode when I made this one. Anyways, moving on to a card I'm actually a fan of. It is the Mutator. This is an uncommon 1 colorless, 1 black Zerg drone creature. It has tap, sacrifice Brood Mutator, and remove 2 creep counters from permanents you control. Search your library for a Zerg structure card with mana value 4 or less. Reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. So this is a tutor, kind of for 2 mana, but you do need 2 creep counters to actually use this ability. It is a 1/2, so it can attack if you are unable to tutor, but realistically, you want to be using this to tutor. You do not want this thing to get blocked and die when you have the option to pick up a Zerg structure. And we'll be getting more into Zerg structures as the video goes on, and we have some pretty powerful 4-drop Zerg structures. I think our most expensive Zerg structure, though, is like 9 mana. It's a mythic. It's pretty insane. Obviously a late game card, but this one I like a lot. And it also is very drone flavored. So we got the Harvester, which gives you resources, and then later on we have a Mutator, which actually technically searches for a card, right? But it mutates into a structure, which I think is really cool. It's also exclusive to Zerg structures, so you're not just demonic tutoring whatever you want. I thought it was a pretty cool design. I like this one a lot, and the artwork also came out pretty cool, I think. All right, next uncommon on the list is the Hydralisk Den for 1 colorless, 1 black, and 1 red. It's an enchantment Zerg structure. Its base ability, as long as you control 3 or more Zerg structures, Zerg creatures you control get +1/+0. Pretty basic, but not bad. It also has tap, remove a creep counter from a permanent you control. If a Hydralisk creature you control attacked this turn, not dealt damage, attacked, Hydralisk Den deals 2 damage to target opponent. This is a tap ability, so it's not every single time a Zerg attacks or a Hydralisk attacks. It's only once the Hydralisk attacks, you tap it, it deals 2 damage. That's it. That's why it's not a rare. Pretty basic. What I really want this card for, though, when I play, is for that +1/+0 ability, especially when I have creatures with We Are the Swarm. Just buffing them up a little bit makes them a little harder to block and also makes it more likely for me to make my tokens. And next we have the Mutalisk. Again, this was around the time where I was in crisis mode doing damage control, where I feel like I really shouldn't have been doing damage control. I think I did the Mutalisk a disservice. It is a 4-drop, 2 colorless, 1 black, 1 red. It's a flying haste 3/2. That seems pretty all right. but I feel like it's missing something. It has another ability. Whenever Mutalisk deals combat damage to a player, if you control a Zerg structure, it deals 1 damage to any target. Maybe I would make it 2 damage. This is a 4-drop. It's uncommon, though, so it doesn't have to be extreme. But I just feel like, I don't know, I almost want to give it We Are the Swarm, but flying We Are the Swarm sounds insane. I feel like that would be too much for an uncommon. Maybe I'm just overcorrecting it, because I am trying to make this balanced within just Magic the Gathering in general. I think it would be really fun to play this against vanilla decks. So I don't know, man. This is another card that, I mean, it looks cool. The artwork's cool. Flying Haste is pretty sweet. 3/2, whatever. But I don't know. It's missing something. Maybe it deals 1 damage to like 3 targets, but that just seems janky. It seems like insurance text, you know? Let me know in the comments what you think I should do with the Muta, because I do think it's missing something, and I think it has a lot of potential. Next uncommon, you may recognize it. It's Counterspell, but with some Kerrigan artwork. It's a blue 2-drop, instant, and the ability is just counter target spell, and that's it. So I guess you're trading 1 card for 1 card. That's why Counterspell isn't necessarily broken. It's a bit of a salty card, but if we're running blue, it would be a sin to not run some sort of Counterspell and control. It would just be dumb. We're running blue, we may as well use it. Next spell on the list, it's an uncommon. It is Terminate for 1 black, 1 red. One of my favorite cards of all time, just basic removal. It's insane. It's an instant, destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated for 2 mana. Can't go wrong. This is an existing card for those of you who are not familiar with Magic the Gathering. It's just using Minsk when Kerrigan murked him. So pretty fitting artwork, I think. All right, the next uncommon is also a card that exists in Magic the Gathering. It's an Offer You Can't Refuse for 1 blue mana. It's an instant, counter target non-creature spell. Its controller creates 2 treasure tokens, and that's it. I did pull this screenshot from one of the cinematics in StarCraft 2, so this one is not generated art. I just thought it was really fitting for the text on the actual card itself. Pretty decent card, good control. That also gives a little bit back to your opponent, so they're not going to punch you in the face across the table. Next uncommon is the Shelled Brood. This is a 3-drop, 2 colorless, 1 black. It is a Zerg Roach with We Are the Swarm, and as long as you control 1 or more lands with creep counters, Roach Brood has Death Touch, and it's a 2/4. This one I think is justified. I like the design on this one. With We Are the Swarm, it will create copies of itself, and if it has Death Touch, your opponents might not want to block it, so they have to make the decision to block it and deny you from making a copy of this creature, or they let you make a copy and then you have 2 of them and then they start expanding even more. It's really cool. Kind of starts off maybe not too scary and then gets really scary. Only a 2/4 with those 2 abilities. I think it's justified for an uncommon, and I think this design is the design I'm going for. 4 cards like the Mutalisk, where I felt like something was missing, I want them to feel more like this card. Okay, next on our list is the Spine Beast. This is an uncommon 3-drop, 2 colorless, 1 black. It was originally named Hydralisk, just Hydralisk, because I thought it was cool, but then I was like, oh wait, no, I'm making the Hunter Killer also, which is a Hydralisk variant, and I'm also making them able to be sacrificed into lurkers, which is why this is a Zerg Hydralisk creature, and also why it missed the audit once again. So I do have to go back and edit these cards, but it's got sacrifice another creature. Target creature gains menace until end of turn, so you might be able to give menace to a creature with We Are the Swarm, which would be insane. And as long as you control 2 or more Zerg structures, Hydralisk also has Death Touch. I was kind of considering maybe because our previous Roach gets Death Touch when you have creep counters, that maybe we could make the Hydralisk get menace instead. It would just be more consistent with its first ability. I don't know. Let me know down in the comments, but that is our Hydralisk creature, the Spine Beast. Okay, now we've got the Overseer, and I'm stoked on this card. This is an uncommon, a 2 colorless, 1 blue. It's a 1/4 with flying. When Overseer enters, create a 0/1 black changeling creature token. Fitting, that's what happens in StarCraft 2. Also, it has Detector, so as long as Overseer is untapped, creatures your opponents control can't have hexproof. I was stoked on this ability. It's so perfect for detection, because hexproof would be like the equivalent of cloak or something like that. You can't target it, and I guess that could imply that you can't see it, but Detector cancels that out. I think that's a really unique, very blue flavored ability. I am stoked on this card. And you can't have Zerg without Infested Terran. So we've got the Infested Infiltrator. This is a 3-drop. It's an uncommon. It's 2 colorless, 1 blue. It's a human Zerg creature. It's a 2/3, but I think I might have overcorrected this one as well. So the first ability, when Infested Infiltrator dies, if it's the first time a Zerg creature you control died this turn, put a creep counter on target basic land you control. In the end, you're losing a creature. I think it's justified to just do it without that caveat of the first time a Zerg creature you control died. Since you're losing a creature and you're consuming creep all the time, I think it makes sense that the ability would just trigger no matter what. It does have a second ability, though. Whenever a creep counter is put on a land you control, you survey 1. So you don't necessarily want him to die, but when he does die, at the very least, you would get a creep counter. I don't know. Let me know. I think it's maybe a little bit too weak as is with that first ability. And for our last uncommon, we have the Spawning Pool for 3 mana, 1 colorless, 2 black, enchantment, Zerg structure. I think this one is on the border of uncommon and rare. So its base ability, at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 0/1 black changeling creature token. The idea behind that is it generates tokens that can always be used for the other structure abilities, like the Lurker Den, which we'll see later, which converts Hydras to Lurkers, or we could use it on the Baneling Nest for Banelings, because the Changeling is a Zergling and a Hydralisk and every other creature you could ever want it to be. And its other ability is tap. If you control 3 or more Zerg structures, exile target Zerg creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard. Create a token that's a copy of that creature. So if you lose a creature, like a Zergling or one of those 3-drop roaches, or I think the Spine Beast was also 3-drop, you can bring it back and you have a token of it that time, and you can still use its abilities. So it's kind of some graveyard recursion with the caveat of being 3 or less mana. If it was any mana, obviously this would be a rare. So yeah, I think it's a pretty good card. Also gives us some recursion in the scenario that maybe we lost a creature too soon, or there was some removal on the board that took out a creature like the Harvester that was producing creep counters for us. So a lot of utility on this one. I think it's a really useful card, and it also has that Zerg structure mechanic where you can only use that recursion if you have structures on your board. So it requires you to have some sort of board investment before you can start just pulling stuff from your graveyard. All right, moving on to our rares. The first one is the Queen. She is a 3-drop. She's blue-black, 1 colorless, 1 blue, 1 black. She has tap, put a creep counter on target basic land you control, activate only as a sorcery. She also has tap, remove a creep counter from a land you control, and draw a card. With our commander and the draw power there, we might not use that one all the time, but it's still nice to have, and it also requires creep to do it, or removing creep to do it. And her other ability, as long as you control 2 or more Zerg structures, Zerg creatures you control have vigilance. So I think she's a really important card. She's a 1/4. I think a 3 cost is justified, especially because it requires you to have Zerg structures if you want your creatures to have vigilance. And she's more of a utility card rather than an offensive card. A 1/4 is not going to do much. You're going to be tapping her for creep counters most of the time, is how I suspect this will play out. So you're not even really going to be able to use that 4 defense for blocking unless you really need to. I guess you could leave her untapped, but my main concern right now is I don't know if I have enough creep generators in this deck, so we'll see. I feel like this is a card that we're going to be relying on a lot, but she can be copied from the Spawning Pool because she only costs 3. If you lose her and she's in your graveyard, you can create a token copy of her and still have access to these abilities, so that's something to consider as well. All right, next is the Roach Warren. It's a bit of a mouthful. It's a rare. It's a 5-drop, 3 colorless, 2 black, enchantment, Zerg structure. When Roach Warren enters the battlefield, put a creep counter on up to 2 basic lands you control, so a bit more creep generation now that we're in the rares. Whenever a roach you control dies, choose one. Put a 1/1 counter on another Zerg creature you control, or put a creep counter on target land or Zerg structures. So this one does allow you to put creep on Zerg structures as well. You won't be tapping those, I don't think, for mana. Instead, that will be used as the resource for when you have to remove creep counters, and that way you can keep creep counters on your lands and keep that kind of multicolored mana that creep allows for Zerg creatures and spells. It also has remove 2 creep counters from among permanents you control, sacrifice a roach, create a Ravager token. So the Ravager token is black. I should have put that in the rules text, but it has menace. It's a 4/2, and when this creature dies, it deals 2 damage to any target. So I don't know. I feel like it could be a black-red, but since it's a token, I decided to keep it one color. Pretty all right ability, but I also don't know if I would want to lose the black roach that has death touch and we are the swarm. Eventually they start to create copies of themselves, so you can maybe sacrifice one, create a Ravager. That was my reasoning there. It also has one ability. I accidentally put tap twice, but you just tap it once, so another card I have to edit. If you control 3 or more Zerg structures, remove a creep counter from among permanents you control. Target creature gains menace and +1/+0 until end of turn. In this case, my reasoning is also give a creature with We Are the Swarm menace, make it that much harder to block, and give yourself more of a chance to create a copy of a creature with We Are the Swarm. That's the whole reasoning behind this one. Again, a bit of a mouthful, but I think it's justified for being a rare, more utility type of card rather than offensive type of card. There are some offensive abilities like menace and +1/+0, but some of it is creep generation as well. Next rare on our list is an infestor type creature. It's the Neural Conductor. This is a 4-drop. It's a blue, mono blue creature. It's 3 colorless, 1 blue. Has the first time a Zerg creature you control dies each turn, choose one, scry 2, or put a creep counter on target land. I think it should be basic land. I think I might have missed that. And it also has, whenever you put 1 or more creep counters on a land, you may tap up to 1 target creature an opponent controls. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So a bit of control there. Stuns a creature when you put a creep counter on a land you control. Now, the issue is this will happen multiple times. So I almost feel like we should switch the only happens once each turn. Like the first time a Zerg creature you control dies each turn, choose one. That implies that it's only going to happen once. But if I have multiple creep generators, like let's say 4 or 5, suddenly I tap or stun 5 creatures on my opponent's board. For a rare 4-drop, that seems pretty brutal. It is also a 3/4, so it's not like it's terribly weak. I don't know. Let me know down in the comments below. Also, my reasoning behind Scry 2 is because the Queen of Blades, if I sacrifice something with We Are the Swarm, I draw 2. I could maybe Scry 2 before I want to sacrifice a creature and draw, and either put those on the bottom and then draw, or decide those are good enough and draw them. So a bit of utility there as well. Reading it now, though, I feel like this is just really sweaty and will get me punched in the face, because whenever you put a creep counter on a land, you stun a creature, but you just do it indefinitely, potentially. I mean, there's no infinite combos in this deck, but you know what I mean. You can do it multiple times. Seems a bit rude. So let me know in the comments. But either way, I think the design is cool. I feel like the concept is pretty sweet. So I'm going to keep it in. We'll see how it goes during playtesting. Next on the list is the Hunter Killer for 5 mana. It's a black-red creature, so 3 colorless, 1 black, 1 red. This is artwork I actually pulled from Pinterest from Francois St. Pierre, so thank you for that. It's a 4/2 with menace and We Are the Swarm, so a bit weak in terms of toughness, but where it lacks in toughness, it has menace and it has the potential to create a copy of itself. Also, it has a really crazy ability. Tap, sacrifice another Zerg creature. Hunter Killer deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to any target. And if you recall, the Queen of Blades starts buffing creatures with We Are the Swarm, including this card. And it starts as a 4/2. If we have copies of it, suddenly we have multiple abilities to burn. We have 2 hunter killers, for example, that could do this tap ability, but the next turn we might have 4. So for a 5-drop, I think this is justified. As a 4/2, it's not unkillable, but it's definitely not something you want to allow to copy itself. So it forces interaction, but I think it's mostly fair, especially for a rare. I've seen rares that are way more busted than this, so I'm okay with this ability. Let me know what you think, though. I think this card's pretty sick. Next rare is the classic. It's a Corruptor. This is a blue-black card. It's a 5-drop, so it's 3 colorless, 1 blue, 1 black, flying. Of course, it's a 4/4. And I kind of wanted this card to be reminiscent of the card in RTS, so an anti-air focused card. Whenever Corruptor deals combat damage to a creature, put a -1/-1 counter on that creature, but it also has a tap ability. Put a -1/-1 counter on target creature with flying. Activate only if you control a Zerg structure. Pretty basic. I don't even know if I would consider this rare. It has pretty wordy abilities, and also there is proliferate in this deck, so if used properly, this could get pretty crazy pretty quick, and a 4/4 flying is also kind of rough. So I think it's all right for a rare. It's not as crazy as the Hunter Killer, but the Hunter Killer doesn't have flying. It has menace, which is also something to consider. So I don't know, let me know in the comments what you think. I feel like I could make it maybe more Zerg flavored in a way. I just don't know how yet. All right, we have our next Zerg structure. It's the Lurker Den. This is mono black. It's a 5-drop, 3 colorless, 2 black, enchantment, Zerg structure. Has tap, sacrifice a Hydralisk creature, create a 2/3 black Zerg Lurker creature token with Defender. And not only do Lurkers have Defender, whenever Lurker blocks a creature, it deals 1 damage to each attacking creature. So I was thinking kind of like splash damage with the spines and stuff. So a little bit more justification for converting one of your Hydras to a Lurker, since both Hydralisks are pretty decent cards. And the Lurker Den also has, as long as you control 3 or more Zerg structures, Lurker tokens you control can block any number of creatures. So not only do they have Defender and they deal splash damage, but if you have 3 or more Zerg structures, suddenly they are board blockers. Again, gives you more justification for sacrificing a precious Hydralisk for a Lurker. Also gives you the ability to switch to a more defensive play if the board state is not necessarily looking like it's in your favor. So I think there's a lot of strategy here. I'm pretty satisfied with this card. I will say I do have some balancing concerns where if I start generating a ton of Hunter Killers, for example, and it feels like I have an infinite supply or potential supply of Lurkers, that it could get out of hand, but it does require investment of not only a Zerg structure, but also of creating Hydralisk tokens and things like that. I mean, there's also changelings in play as well that we could convert to Lurkers, but maybe it's one of those things where if your opponent lets you get to that point, maybe it's deserved. You know what I mean? At some point, Magic does tend to be that way. So I don't know, let me know in the comments below if you think this is a little bit imba or not, because I'm kind of on the fence. Okay, next rare on the list is the Hatchery. Now, the Hatchery, Lair, and Hive are all pretty wordy, and they're also the only tech structures I have that follow the flow of Zerg evolution or mutation. You pay to make the Hatchery a Lair, and then you pay to make the Hatchery a Hive, sort of thing is what happens in RTS. So I kind of wanted to translate that into Magic the Gathering. So this is a 4-drop mono black. It's 2 colorless, 2 black. When Hatchery enters, put a creep counter on target land you control. I think I should make it target basic land you control. And at the beginning of your end step, if you control 3 or more Zerg structures, create a 0/1 black creep larva creature token. Now, the creep larva token has, when creep larva dies, not when it's sacrificed, just when it dies, it's also a 0/1. Put a creep counter on target basic land you control, and that's it. So the Hatchery, in a way, is like a pseudo creep engine where it generates tokens, which can be used for sacrifice fodder and also generate more creep for you. And it has, if you control 2 or more Zerg structures, you may pay 2 black. If you do, search your library for a card named Lair, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library, activate only as a sorcery and only once each turn. And the Lair is also a rare, but we won't see the Hive until we get to the Mythics because the Hive gets pretty crazy. But let's move on to the Lair. All right, here it is, the Lair. Also, one thing to note, the only Zerg structures that allow you to tutor or search your library for other Zerg structures are the Hatchery and the Lair. That was kind of what I was thinking when I was making these, where they evolve into each other in a way. And they also have abilities where each iteration costs 2 less if you own the previous one. So, for example, here's the Lair. It's a 5-drop, a rare, 3 colorless, 2 black. And the first ability, this card costs 2 less to cast if you already control a Hatchery. So you feel like you're teching up a little bit, was my goal there. Also, when Lair enters, put a creep counter on target land you control. Again, I think it should be basic land. And as long as you control 3 or more lands with creep counters, you have no maximum hand size, which synergizes really well with the Queen of Blades double draw ability. Suddenly, it feels like you're stacking up larva. You have no maximum hand size. You can hold as much as you want in your hand, and that is really powerful in Magic the Gathering. I also have Thought Vessel, which gives you no maximum hand size, just in case you don't end up getting a Lair in one of your games. And whenever a Zerg creature you control dies, put a 1/1 counter on up to 1 target creature you control with We Are the Swarm, again making creatures with We Are the Swarm just a little bit more scary. And if you control 4 or more Zerg structures, you can tap Lair. You can pay 2 black. If you do, search your library for a card named Hive, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library, activate only as a sorcery. Seems pretty busted that you can just search for a mythic card, but there's plenty of tutors out there that just let you search for whatever card you want. So I think this is justified, especially because you do need 4 or more Zerg structures to make that happen. All right, next on the list is the Swarm Host. This is another rare 5-drop, 3 colorless, 2 black. I think I forgot to highlight the, oh man, so it's a 4/4, I think. I can't read it. No, sorry, I think it's a 2/4. I forgot to highlight that. So another thing that missed the audit, my bad. It's a 2/4. At the beginning of your end step, you may remove up to 2 creep counters from lands you control, so 1 or 2. If you do, create 2 1/1 black Zerg locust creature tokens with flying for each creep counter removed this way. So you either create 2 locusts or you create 4, and then you exile those tokens at the beginning of the next end step. But the goal is, if you have them and you have your commander, you may as well sacrifice them. Otherwise, they get exiled for nothing. So they become sacrifice fodder, and they are the prime targets for using for sacrifice because they are going to go away anyway. So that's it, the Swarm Host. All right, next on the list, I think, is a really clean card. It's a Zerg Cerebrate. It's Zaz. He's mono black, 3 colorless, 1 black, a legendary creature. Whenever 1 or more creatures die, put a creep counter on up to 1 target basic land. Now, it's not only your creatures, it's also your opponent's creatures, and also triggers off your sack outlets. So this is a hell of a creep engine. And at the beginning of your end step, if 3 or more creatures died this turn, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. That will only trigger once because it's at your end step, but still, it really encourages you to use your sack outlets. It encourages you to block or remove your opponent's creatures somehow. I just think this is a really sick legendary creep engine card, and a really important card because we rely on creep to make our deck function. Okay, next rare on the list is Endless Reconstitution. This is a 2x card, so 1 blue, 1 black, 1x cost. It's a sorcery. Return any number of target Zerg creature cards with mana value X or less from your graveyard to your hand. A sorcery, I think this is justified as a rare. It also just feels very Zerg to be able to recycle your biomass in a way, and just give us some more option for returning cards that we sacrificed back into our hand. And hopefully, by the time we use this, we don't have a maximum hand size. So I think it's a pretty sick card. Let me know what you think in the comments. This one, Yeah, it just feels very Zerg, you know what I mean? Next is another legendary rare creature. It's Atticus Carpenter Ascended. So he's from StarCraft 1, I think, and as I recall, he was like a Zerg cultist. He was an ideologist that pretty much worshipped the Zerg, if I'm not mistaken, and was eventually absorbed into a Cerebrate. I could be wrong about that. It's been years, but I just remembered the name, and I looked it up in the wiki, and I already forgot what it said. But I created a legendary creature out of him. He is a human Zerg, so he's infested. He's a 3/4. He's a 4-drop. He's a blue-black, so 2 colorless, 1 blue, 1 black. Whenever an opponent casts their first creature spell each turn, put a creep counter on target basic land you control. Whenever a Zerg creature you control dies, put a 1/1 counter on up to 1 other target Zerg creature. So again, gives you some buffs on your creatures. It's not just We Are the Swarm creatures. It could be another Zerg creature without We Are the Swarm, and does also provide you creep counters as well. Does feel very blue-black to me. Again, I don't know. I feel like maybe it's a little bit underwhelming for a rare. Maybe we could put 2 creep counters on target permanents we control for a rare that's a 4-drop, instead of saying, oh, it happens once each turn. And instead of letting it happen multiple times each turn, just say put 2 creep counters on lands you control. Let me know what you think. I think this one could be audited just a little bit, but I do like the concept of this card in general. All right, next it's the Infestor. This card was originally a blue-black 3-drop, so it was colorless blue-black, but then I added red and I made it a 4-drop. So it's a colorless red, blue, and black. I think it's one of the only tri-colored Zerg cards we have in here, minus our commander. It's a 1/3, and it has a pretty basic ability that's actually kind of ridiculous. It's tap, remove a creep counter from a land you control, gain control of target creature until end of turn, untap that creature, it gains haste until end of turn, activate this ability only once per turn. I think using tap, that already implies it's activated once per turn, so I don't think we really need to say it's only activated once per turn. Anyways, I feel like this is all colors combined. You remove a creep counter, it's Zerg. Zerg feels very black. Then you have gain control of target creature, that feels very blue, and then the haste until end of turn, that feels very red. Also a very aggressive ability. Gaining control of a target creature potentially every single turn as long as you have the creep for it is insane. Justifies it being a rare, and I think it justifies it being a 4-drop. One thing I thought I might add to this is, as long as it's tapped, it has hexproof, like it's burrowed or something, but that just felt super sweaty and kind of gross. But I don't know, maybe I'll put it back. We'll see how it plays, and after I test it a bit, if it feels like it's too easily removed, maybe I'll give it hexproof when it taps. But again, that almost feels like insurance. We'll see. We'll see how it goes, but I think this card is sick so far. I'm really excited to try this one out. All right, next on the list is a card that actually exists in Magic. It's Chaos Warp. This is a mono red card, a 3-drop, a 2 colorless, 1 red instant, a rare, and the owner of target permanent shuffles it into their library, then reveals the top card of their library. If it's a permanent card, they put it onto the battlefield. This is something that you could use against your opponent and just hope that they don't draw anything good. I feel like I'm going to use this more often on a Zergling or one of my 1-drops, because we do run a ton of permanents here, and we run a lot of mythic permanents in here. Chances of us drawing something crazy that we wouldn't be able to play otherwise at a certain point in the game, like turn 3 or 4, and drawing a 9-drop mythic rare Zerg structure, is just crazy. It's a crazy concept to me, so I feel like we'll be using this more on ourselves. I used a Nidus Worm concept for the artwork, and I think it turned out pretty all right. But yep, Chaos Warp. And yet again, another card that does exist in Magic, Stubborn Denial. This is a 1-drop mono blue, so 1 blue mana. It's an instant. Counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1. It has Ferocious. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, counter that spell instead. Just feels very Zerg flavored. Also, as we buff our Zerg creatures with our commander or one of our other structures, chances are this will become a 1-drop counterspell, which is just super disgusting. It's non-creature, but still, you could counter removal. You could counter a board wipe. There's a lot you could do with this card, and chances are it's going to be just a flat out counter by the time we want to use it, at least. I think it's sick, and I used an Infester with some blue energy for the artwork. Pretty alright card, I think. Alright, this was one of the first cards I made for this deck, and it needs some editing. Missed a few things in audit, and I think I missed one number in the ability section, so we'll get to that in a second. This is a rare. It's a 4-drop mono red, so 2 colorless, 2 red. It's Zerg. As long as you control 3 or more lands with creep counters, Ravager, or in this case, Bile Spitter, has We Are the Swarm. So it doesn't have We Are the Swarm right off the bat, but if you have enough creep counters, it does, and it can get really scary because it's a 4/3. Also has Sacrifice another creature and choose one. Bile Spitter deals 2 damage to any target, or remove a creep counter from a land you control, and it's supposed to say Bile Spitter deals 4 damage to any target. Activate only once each turn. So it's got burn that deals either 2 damage, or if you have the creep for it, it deals 4 damage, but you want to make sure you have enough creep that Bile Spitter actually has We Are the Swarm. Again, forces a bit more strategic gameplay, and I think it's a pretty sick card. All right, we've got 2 more rares on the list, and then it's on to the Mythics. This is the Lost Mimic. It's a blue-black creature, a 4-drop rare, so it's 2 colorless, 1 blue, 1 black. It's a shapeshifter changeling, and you may have Lost Mimic enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it's also a Zerg and keeps its other abilities. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a creep counter from a permanent you control. If you can't, you sacrifice Lost Mimic. So it does come in as a copy of anything you want on the battlefield, but there is that upkeep cost where you have to have enough creep counters to make sure this thing stays alive. And that was kind of a balancing choice I had. And I did make it a changeling, not only because it fits the flavor, but if I do need to sacrifice it, I can sacrifice it as a Zergling into a Baneling, or as a Hydralisk into a Lurker, or as a Roach into a Ravager, something like that. And yeah, I think it turned out pretty cool. I also really like the artwork. I made it look like a changeling that's lost control of itself. So as you can see, it's got the Terran on the left. It's got kind of some Zerg changeling flavor in the middle. And then on the right, it's a Protoss, was what I was going for there. We'll see how this plays. Again, I'm kind of concerned with how much creep I'm consuming versus how much creep I'm generating. But we also do have Proliferate later on where the Mythics are concerned, so it might even itself out. We'll see. All right, last rare on the list, and then we are on to the highly anticipated Mythics. This is the Spire. It's a Zerg structure as well, an enchantment. It's blue-black, a 4-drop, so 2 colorless, 1 blue, 1 black. Some pretty basic abilities. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 3 or more Zerg structures, create a 1/1 black Swarmer creature token with flying. And that's literally all the Swarmer is, just a 1/1 with flying. It was just it's a token that I wanted to create. I wanted some more creature or token generation for the Zerg deck. And in addition to that, it has some blue flavor, so whenever a flying creature you control deals combat damage to a player, scry one. So it synergizes with its own tokens, it synergizes with other flying creatures, got some blue-black flavor in there, and gives us some sacrifice fodder as well. I think it justifies being a rare for a 4-drop. All right, now we're on to the heavy hitters, the Mythics, and some of these are very wordy and potentially broken, so consider these prototypes. They are in my print order, so I will be physically playtesting them, and I'll film that as well, but let me know what you think of these. We're going to start off strong with the Overmind. This is a legendary Zerg creature. It's a Zerg horror for 6. It's 4 colorless, 1 red, 1 black, and this creature can't be countered. It's also a 0/9, very Eldrazi flavored, right? Just can't be countered. Has Assimilate. So whenever you sacrifice a Zerg creature, choose one. Target creature gains We Are the Swarm forever. Insane. Draw a card and lose 1 life. it's more situational. I don't suspect you would use that a lot, and you also have the option to exile the top card of target opponent's library until end of turn. You may play that card, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. If you cast a creature spell this way, that creature becomes infested as it enters the battlefield. As a reminder, you control an infested creature until you don't control any other Zerg on the battlefield, and then it returns to its owner. And at the beginning of your end step, if 2 or more Zerg creatures died under your control this turn, you may sacrifice another Zerg or a third Zerg. When you do, assimilate. So you do all the top stuff again, which is crazy. You can also sacrifice another Zerg to add a red or a black mana. Definitely Mythic flavored. I don't think it's out of control based on some other Mythics I've seen, but it's definitely not a chill Mythic, and I think it's definitely Overmind flavored. I think it's sick. I'm really excited to try this one out when I playtest. All right, next is the Hive. As you recall, the hatchery lets you tutor or search into a lair, and the lair lets you search into a hive. This is a mythic rare 7-drop, 5 colorless, 2 black. This card costs 2 less to cast if you already control a lair, so potentially a 5-drop, which is insane. When Hive enters, put a creep counter on target land you control. If you sacrifice a creature to activate an ability of a permanent you control, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. So basically, it's a sacrifice ability doubler, which is insane based on how many sacrifice mechanics we have. I think that would make us create 2 Banelings out of 1 Zergling. It would make us create 2 Lurkers, for example. I mean, there's a lot of sacrifice mechanics. It would make us assimilate twice, I think, if we sacrificed a creature, which is insane. And as long as you control 4 or more lands with creep counters, creature tokens you control have trample. Think of We Are the Swarm. That gets pretty crazy. Zerg creatures you control cost 1 less to cast, or as long as you control 5 or more lands with creep counters, Zerg creatures you control cost 2 less to cast instead. So my goal for this card was to make it feel like a really important Zerg structure, like a really important part of your ecosystem. It's not necessarily aggressive to the player. It just makes all your stuff go crazy. And that was my goal. I'm really happy with how this card turned out. It's actually the first Mythic I designed, and I'm really stoked on how this one turned out. Let me know what you think down in the comments, because I feel like this card will really change how this deck plays. It almost feels like it's bringing everything together. You know what I mean? Next on our list is a Planeswalker, and what better Planeswalker to have than Zagara, Broodmother. She's a legendary Planeswalker, a 5-drop, 3 colorless, 1 red, 1 black, with a static ability that I might change. So once per turn, if 1 or more creep counters would be put on a permanent you control, put that many plus 1 creep counter on that permanent instead. I feel like I might just make it a creep doubler. The reason I didn't was because I wanted to show some restraint. The whole point of my Zerg deck was to make it play on resource management a little bit, and I didn't want creep to become inconsequential in the mid to late game. That's why it only happens once per turn. We'll see, though, because I also have Proliferate, which also might make creep inconsequential. But the reason I put Proliferate in this deck is because it's just a very Zerg sounding ability. So we'll see what I do with Zagara. She also has a +1 ability, create a 1/1 Zerg creature token. You may sacrifice another creature. If you do, put a creep counter on a permanent you control. So it's also a bit of a creep engine kind of ability. She also starts with 5 loyalty, by the way, and her ultimate, which costs 8 loyalty, it's a -8. For each permanent you control with a creep counter on it, create a 3/3 Zerg creature token with trample and haste. Until end of turn, whenever a Zerg creature you control dies, it deals 1 damage to each non-Zerg creature. So it becomes almost like a board wipe, depending on how you use it, because if you have a sack outlet, you could just sacrifice all those tokens with the Queen of Blades, and if you had like 15 of them or something like that, suddenly it does 15 damage to each non-Zerg creature. I think it's fair, though, because it's not a guaranteed board wipe, and it's a mythic, and it's her ultimate ability, and planeswalkers are always kind of disgusting. Next is another disgusting card, but it's a mythic, so what do you expect? This is an 8-drop, though. It's the Swarm Descends, mono black, 6 colorless, 2 black, sorcery. Create a 1/1 black Zerg creature token for each land you control with a creep counter. At this point in the game, you might have a lot, you might not, though, depending on how you played it. Creatures you control get +X/+0 and gain menace until end of turn, where X is the number of Zerg creatures you control. So you create tokens, then you get +X/+0 and menace. Also kind of insane. And until end of turn, whenever a Zerg creature you control dies, create a 1/1 black Zerg creature token. So whatever creatures you controlled that died, at least you get some sacrifice fodder back. That will synergize with your Queen of Blades. I think this is a pretty good sorcery, and depending on how the game was played, for an 8-drop, this might be a finisher. Really cool card. I like how the artwork turned out on this, and I think it just reads like a really clean mythic. This is one of my finisher cards. At least that's what it was intended to be. But again, if we don't have enough creep generators, this might be kind of an underwhelming mythic depending on what the state of the game looks like. So we'll see how it goes, but I think it has a lot of potential. Next on the list is another Zerg structure. This is the Colony Ascendant. This is a 6-drop, 3 colorless, 2 black, 1 blue enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, choose one. Sacrifice a creature. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a Zerg in addition to its other types and has +1/+1. So almost like pseudo We Are the Swarm, except it physically chooses a creature and then creates a copy of it. But there are creatures in our deck that do not have We Are the Swarm. That would be pretty crazy if we could copy them. The Overmind does grant We Are the Swarm to those creatures, but if you don't have the Overmind, Colony Ascendant does give you the option to duplicate your creatures, which I think is really cool. You also have the option to sacrifice a Zerg creature. If you do, create 2 0/1 black changeling creature tokens. This will allow you to create fodder for your other Zerg structures, or those engines that create lurkers, ravagers, banelings, things like that. Or you put a creep counter on target basic land you control. For a mythic card, and at the state of the game that this would enter, I almost feel like I would want it to put 2 creep counters on a target basic land I'd control. But I don't know. We'll see. I'll play test it for a while first, and if I feel like I don't have enough creep generators, I might edit this one as well. But either way, I'm pretty stoked with how this one turned out. I think this card also has a lot of potential, but it's a mythic, so what would you expect? Okay, here's one of my favorite mythics I've designed. It's Xeris. This is a legendary land. It's a planet, and for those of you who are unaware, it's the origin of the Zerg. Xeris enters the battlefield tapped. It does tap for a swamp. At the beginning of your end step, if a Zerg creature you control died this turn, and it's likely it will, put a creep counter on target land. This one is intended, so it's any land, and you can also put it on Xeris if you want. And as long as you control 5 or more permanents with creep counters, whenever you tap a land you control with a creep counter for mana, it's a bit wordy, it produces 1 additional mana of any color. Spend this mana to cast Zerg spells. So it basically doubles your mana, but not only does it double your mana, you can use that extra mana as any color. So if I want to tap a land with a creep counter for red, but I also need a blue, I can use the second mana it would produce as blue. This is very Zerg flavored. This is very mythic flavored. I think this one is sick. I'm not going to edit it. I don't care what you guys tell me. This one is staying as is. Also, it's a land that provides pseudo ramp, which I think is important for Commander and also for a Zerg deck. Next on the list is another Zerg structure. This is a legendary enchantment. It's the Nerve Cluster. This is a blue-black card. It's a 5-drop, 3 colorless, 1 blue, 1 black. Zerg creatures you control get +1/+1. Just makes sense. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control 3 or more lands with creep counters, target Zerg creature you control gains We Are the Swarm until end of turn. So this is a temporary We Are the Swarm, but I mean, once a card has We Are the Swarm, it'll create a token of itself, a token copy of itself. Really good. Whenever a Zerg creature you control with one or more counters on it dies, draw a card, so you get some card draw as well. You also have tap, sacrifice a Zerg creature, put a creep counter on target basic land you control. So not only does it potentially copy Zerg creatures you have on the board, but it also helps you out with creep generation as well. Again, I think this is a very good Zerg flavored mythic card. All right, so when I was building this deck, I had the concept for a Mythic Ultralisk because the Ultralisk is iconic, but then I ended up thinking about this card, and the Ultralisk turned into the Swarm, which you see right here. This is a 5-drop mono black creature, a Zerg creature. It's 3, 2 black with trample. It's a 5/5, and it has We Are the Swarm, and that's it. That's all you need. I mean, a 5/5 with trample and the potential for creating copies of itself every time it deals combat damage to a player is insane enough. That's very Ultralisk flavored in my opinion, and this is how I decided to leave it. So let me know what you think, but this one I'm really stoked on. It's a really clean card that comes down on turn 5 or potentially earlier if you have those artifact mana ramp cards. So really crazy card, and has the potential to snowball extremely aggressively and could be like a pseudo finisher on turn 5 or earlier, so maybe it's even broken. I don't know. I think I'm going to leave it as is. I think it's aggressive enough, and there's plenty of vanilla Magic cards that are just as aggressive as this, so I think I'm going to leave it. But yep, there it is, the Swarm, a mythic card. I think just super cool, really Zerg flavored. And next we have yet another structure, the Crucible of Evolution. This is a legendary enchantment, another 5-drop, so it's 3 black, and at the beginning of your end step, if 3 or more Zerg creatures died this turn, proliferate. If 5 or more Zerg creatures died this turn, proliferate again, and that's it. I think that's a really clean mythic design, and also part of the reason I was okay with putting this many mythics in this deck is because a lot of them are utility cards or cards that improve your board state rather than function as all-out finishers. That is why I have these sorts of mythics, and I think this is also a really Zerg themed mythic. I mean, you proliferate once and you have the potential to proliferate again if you're really being aggressive with your Zerg mechanics and your sacrifice mechanics. 3 creatures that die, I could see that happening pretty often. 5 creatures that die, that is deliberate, and that is why I added that second line right there. And it lands on turn 5, which is also why I didn't put more creep engines in this deck, because this landing on turn 5 will start proliferating your creep counters, and eventually it would just get insane. So I was trying to find a balance between creep generators and then cards like this that actually proliferate. Because if you have 6 creep counters, suddenly you have 12, and then creep doesn't seem like it matters anymore, you know? So I was really working hard to find the balance, but we'll see. I'll only really know once I start playtesting this, I think. But I'm going to keep this card. I think it has a lot of potential, and it's definitely on brand for Zerg. All right, next on the list is a Zerg Cerebrate. It's Dagoth. This is a blue-black creature, so it's 3 blue-black legendary creature. Creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped and don't untap during their controller's next untap step, so they just enter stunned, which is really aggressive. And at the beginning of your end step, you may remove a creep counter from a land you control. If you do, tap up to 1 target creature an opponent controls. I do think I missed a bit of text there, because if it's at the beginning of my end step and I tap a creature an opponent controls, it just untaps during their untap step, so I would have to say it doesn't untap during their next untap step. Dagoth is also a 3/6, so relatively good defender kind of card if you need something to block with, but I do have to add that additional line at the bottom of Dagoth, otherwise his second ability is kind of useless. He was supposed to be kind of a black-blue flavored control card with a focus on stunning opponent creatures, and I just missed a line of text there, but I think he's a half-decent mythic. I think it's justified for a 5-drop. I mean, I've seen 5-drop mythics that are way crazier than this. I can live with that, but I also feel like maybe I want to add something. So we'll see. We'll see if Dagoth ends up being the same after playtesting. and I'm going to be playtesting a lot, so we'll see how it goes. Next is one of my other favorite mythics, the Greater Spire. This is a blue-black card inspired by Eldrazi Monument, but it's a 7-drop, so it's 5 blue-black. It's a legendary enchantment Zerg structure. Pretty basic, though. Creatures you control with counters on them have flying, and we're putting counters on a ton of our creatures, especially with our commander, so suddenly all your little Zerglings with We Are the Swarm have flying. Insane. And as long as you control 5 or more Zerg structures, creatures you control with flying have Death Touch. So a little bit more salt on the wound after this card comes out, but I think this is very justified for a 7-drop mythic with 2 basic but pretty strong abilities that synergize a lot with everything we got going on in this deck. It synergizes with our Zerg structure mechanics, and it synergizes with our commander, and as you recall, the Queen of Blades does have the option to buff our creatures that have We Are the Swarm every single time we deal damage to an opponent. So this will snowball pretty much way out of control, if not just be an all-out finisher when it enters the field. At 7 mana, though, that is justified. Most of the cards I run in my vanilla decks have finishers that cost about that much. I'm really excited to try this one out in playtesting. Next on the list is another Planeswalker. It's Abathur, Evolution Architect. This is a blue-black 4-drop, so 2 blue-black legendary Planeswalker. Starts with 4 loyalty. Its +1 is proliferate, pretty basic. Its -3 is create a token that's a copy of target Zerg creature you control. Put a 1/1 counter on token creature created this way. It's similar to what we already have going on, so I might edit one of those. We'll see, though. We'll see how it plays out when I'm testing it. And its -7 is for each creature you control, put a 1/1 counter on it for each creature that died this turn. And we're sacrificing creatures a lot, and it doesn't even have to be that crazy. If I sacrifice 5 little tokens to draw cards, and then I do -7, suddenly all my creatures get +5/+5. That could be a finisher depending on the state of the game. It is a -7 ability, though. It's the ultimate ability, so you would, I guess, technically be able to play it the second turn this is out, because it's not a +0 proliferate ability, it's a +1 proliferate ability. So you'll +1 proliferate and then add 1 more loyalty counter. And the reasoning behind that is Abathur is all about Zerg evolution, but he also cares about his own evolution, I would feel like. So flavor-wise, it makes sense. Gameplay-wise, it could be a little busted. We'll see how it goes, especially for a 4-drop. I'm not sure if this is just too much. Let me know down in the comments, but I like where this card is going. It just might need a little bit of tuning, so it's not totally enraging to play against. Next on the list is the Brood Leviathan. This is a blue-black 8-drop, so 5, 2 blue, 1 black legendary Zerg creature, a 6/6 with flying. Whenever another Zerg creature you control dies, create a 1/1 black Zerg creature token and proliferate. At the beginning of your end step, create a 2/2 black Zerg creature token for each time you proliferated this turn. So this isn't a one-time deal where when you sacrifice a creature, for example, you proliferate. I could sacrifice 5 creatures and proliferate 5 times and then create 5 2/2 tokens because I proliferated 5 times. That is insane. It's very snowbally. Again, I think justified for an 8-drop. Could be a finisher. It could be like a soft finisher where it comes in, you're like, oh man, okay, whatever, it proliferates. And then the next turn, I proliferate 10 times, and you're like, oh, well, shit, you just created 10 2/2s, and you proliferated 10 times, so now you have a bunch of creep counters that you can use for your other Zerg stuff. It's a really cool concept, I think, but again, very board dependent, because if my board doesn't have a lot of sacrifice fodder, it kind of stalls a little bit. Yeah, it does generate tokens. I might have 1 token where I can sacrifice and proliferate, and then I create a 2/2 token. But yeah, it's really board state dependent, and that's why I think this is okay, because it's not just straight up broken. It requires you to have been ahead at the point that this enters the game. You know what I mean? So I think it's okay. We'll see how it goes in playtesting, but I think this one is pretty well balanced. All right, this is, I think, one of the true finishers in the Zerg deck. It's the Broodlord. I did call it the Swarm Artillery at some point, and that made it into the rule text. Again, missed the audit, but this is the Broodlord. It's a red-black legendary creature. It's an 8-drop, so 6 blue-black. Flying. It's a 2/6, only a 2/6, but whenever Broodlord attacks, create 3 2/2 black Zerg Broodling creature tokens tapped and attacking. Exile those creatures at the beginning of the next end step. Now, you create 3 extra tokens every time this guy attacks, and whenever a Zerg creature token you control dies, Broodlord deals 1 damage to any target. So if I have a sack outlet, that's 3 damage right there because they're going to get exiled anyway. But we're creating a lot of tokens with this deck. If my opponent's at 12 life and I have 12 tokens, I sacrifice 12 tokens, deal 12 damage to him, and win the game. That's a straight up finishing move. Seems kind of chill at first until you read between the lines with this card. I think it's sick. I think this is a decent finisher. Again, board state dependent. It's not guaranteed, and I think that's what justifies its ability. Also, it's only a 2/6, so it itself does not swing for a ton, but it does create tokens, and it also consumes tokens and converts them to burn, which I think is really cool, and again, very on brand for Zerg. So this card is a card I was really excited to make. It's the Fall of Ire. It's a tricolor card, and it's a 7-drop, so it's 4 blue, black, and red. It's a sorcery, and because the Protoss, I would assume, would have artifacts in Magic the Gathering and maybe enchantments, the first ability, instead of wiping creatures, it wipes artifacts and enchantments, non-Zerg artifacts and enchantments. So the first line, destroy all non-Zerg artifacts and non-Zerg enchantments. For each non-Zerg permanent destroyed this way, create a 1/1 black Zerg creature token. Put a -1/-1 counter on each creature your opponents control, and then proliferate. So the idea behind this card was I wanted it to be very StarCraft flavored and more or less lore friendly. So I wanted to destroy pretty much all the structures and artifacts my opponents had, and then also wither away their actual units through -1/-1 counters and proliferate. That was the idea behind it. I think it's pretty fair. Maybe even a little too nice, depending on what you consider a good board wipe, because there are plenty of board wipes out there that are 5-drops, but they're completely just all over the board, right? You and your opponent. This one is more one-sided, which I think justifies the higher cost and also the more unique ability. But I'm really curious to hear what you guys think about this one. Leave a comment down below if you think I should alter it in any way, but that's my mindset, was destroy infrastructure and then wither away whatever else is left that's still alive, you know? So I think it's pretty cool. All right, last but not least is the Infestation Center. This is a Portal to Phyrexia inspired card. It's a 9-drop. It's a blue-black, so it's 6, 2 black, 1 blue, legendary enchantment, Zerg structure. When Infestation Center enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a creature. Whenever a non-token creature an opponent controls dies, exile it with Infestation Center. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may return any number of creature cards exiled with Infestation Center to the battlefield under your control. They become infested. So effectively, everything that dies from this point on, when this card is on the battlefield, it gets exiled, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, you can bring back any number of those cards onto the battlefield under your control. So if you're playing a free-for-all 4-player game, you have the potential to return 3 creatures right off the bat when it's your turn again, and then anytime something dies, it gets exiled with this card, and you can bring it back at the beginning of your upkeep every single turn. It's disgusting. It's totally justified for a 9-drop, and I think it's very Zerg flavored. It's inspired by an infested command center, as you can see through the artwork, and then the creatures that come back are also infested. I love this card. I am so stoked to play it, but we'll see how often I actually get to play it during my testing. All right, and that is it for our custom StarCraft 2 Magic the Gathering Commander deck. This is not my typical format of video, so let me know how I did in the comments below. I think I'll have the print in about a week, and then in the next month or month and a half, I'm going to try and get this thing actually on camera playing against my buddy's custom One Piece Commander deck. It should be sick. If you have any suggestions for this deck, let me know down in the comments below. As always, big shout out to my members and patrons. I really appreciate the extra layer of support. If you enjoyed what you saw, please consider shooting me a like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'll see you guys on the next one.